In the dimly lit wedding hall, I watched as my best friend Melissa glided down the aisle in the dress I'd paid for. The same friend who had just relegated me to the back row, hidden from view like an embarrassing family secret. As I sat there, invisible despite financing her entire dream wedding, something inside me snapped. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and made the call that would change everything. "Hello, this is the bride's sponsor. I need to make an urgent change to today's arrangements." What happened next left everyone speechless, but I don't regret a single moment. You see, true friendship isn't measured by what you give, but by how you're valued in return. I never thought I'd be the villain in someone else's wedding story, but here we are. Melissa and I had been inseparable since kindergarten, sharing secrets, dreams, and promises of being each other's maid of honor someday. When she met James 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for her. They seemed perfect together, and I supported their relationship from the very beginning. As Melissa's career struggled to take off, mine flourished unexpectedly. A tech startup I'd invested in went public, suddenly making me financially comfortable. When Melissa got engaged last year, her excitement was clouded by financial reality. "We'll probably just do something small," she said, disappointment evident in her voice. That's when I made an offer that came straight from my heart. "Let me help," I said. "I want to give you the wedding you've always dreamed of." Her tears seemed genuine then, as she hugged me and called me her guardian angel. Planning began immediately, with Melissa's dreams growing grander by the day. What started as a generous gift slowly transformed into an unlimited wedding budget. The venue changed from a charming local garden to an exclusive beachfront resort. The guest list doubled, then tripled. The simple white dress became a designer gown flown in from Paris. Through it all, I smiled and signed checks, watching my savings dwindle but comforted by Melissa's joy. "You'll be right beside me through everything," she promised repeatedly. "Best friends forever, right?" I believed her completely, even as I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She started bringing her new friend Claire to our planning meetings, a sophisticated woman she'd met through James's social circle. Claire always had better ideas, more appropriate suggestions. I noticed how Melissa's eyes would seek Claire's approval before mine, but I brushed aside my discomfort. This was Melissa's special day, after all. The wedding weekend arrived, and I flew in early to help with final preparations. The resort was stunning, crystal blue waters visible from every window, elegant decor throughout. I'd arranged everything from welcome baskets for out-of-town guests to a surprise fireworks display for the reception. Yet something felt off from the moment I arrived. Melissa seemed distant, distracted. "Oh, you're here already," she said, when I surprised her at the rehearsal dinner venue. No hug, no excitement, just a quick introduction to Claire's husband before she hurried off to greet other guests. That night, I discovered my room had been changed, moved from the main building to a smaller annex far from the wedding party. "Just a mix-up with reservations," the apologetic hotel manager explained, though I noticed Claire's extended family had taken the rooms originally reserved for me. Still, I said nothing, not wanting to create drama before the big day. The morning of the wedding brought more disappointments. I'd always imagined being part of the bridal preparation, sharing champagne while getting our hair done, helping Melissa into her dress. Instead, I received a text, "Getting ready with bridesmaids. See you at ceremony." When I arrived at the bridal suite anyway, bouquet in hand, I found the door awkwardly half closed to me. "Oh, Sarah, we're actually all set here," Melissa said, barely making eye contact. Behind her, I could see Claire adjusting Melissa's veil, occupying the spot that should have been mine. The other bridesmaids, mostly Claire's friends whom Melissa had only known for months, gave me sympathetic glances. I retreated, fighting back tears, telling myself that perhaps Melissa was just overwhelmed. It wasn't until I arrived at the ceremony that the final blow came. The usher, consulting his list, directed me not to the front rows where family and close friends sat, but to the back corner. "That can't be right," I protested gently. "I'm the bride's best friend." The usher "I'm sorry, these are the final seating arrangements approved by the bride herself." I sat in that back row, watching guests who barely knew Melissa take priority seating. From my position, I could barely see the altar where my supposed best friend would say her vows in the dress I had purchased. The ceremony was about to begin when I noticed James's grandmother, a sweet woman who had traveled from across the country despite her health issues, also being seated in the back. "My hip isn't what it used to be," she whispered to me, "but I couldn't miss my only grandson's wedding." Seeing this elderly woman struggling to see past the sea of guests ahead of us was the final straw. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about respect and basic human decency. With newfound clarity, I excused myself and stepped outside, phone in hand. The wedding coordinator answered on the first ring. "This is Sarah," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to make an immediate change to today's arrangements." First, I instructed the coordinator to discreetly move James's grandmother to the front row, where family belonged. Then came the harder decision. About the reception payment, I continued, heart pounding. "I'll cover the venue and staff costs as promised, but I'm canceling the open bar arrangement." The coordinator sounded confused. "The bride specifically requested premium open bar service." I took a deep breath. "Change it to a cash bar, effective immediately. And please inform the caterer that the upgraded menu has been cancelled. Revert to the standard package." I wasn't being petty. I was simply drawing a line. The basics of their wedding would remain intact. I wouldn't ruin their day entirely, but the extravagant extras I'd added would no longer be my burden to bear. As I ended the call, I noticed a text from Melissa. "Where are you? Ceremony starting." I returned to my seat in silent dignity, watching as my childhood friend married the love of her life while I sat among distant acquaintances. The ceremony proceeded beautifully, with Melissa looking radiant in her gown. I clapped and smiled appropriately, genuinely happy for her despite everything. It wasn't until the reception began that my adjustments became apparent. Guests approached the bar, only to discover they needed to pay for drinks. The dinner, while lovely, wasn't the lavish 7-course meal originally planned. I watched from my assigned table, far from the wedding party, as confusion rippled through the reception. Melissa's face fell as she spoke with the event coordinator, who gestured in my direction. Our eyes met across the room. In that moment, recognition dawned on her face, not just of what I'd done, but why. James's grandmother, now seated proudly at the family table, caught my eye and gave me a knowing nod. She'd been moved to her rightful place, at least. I raised my water glass in a silent toast to her, finding unexpected solidarity in this stranger, who had also been discarded despite her importance. The inevitable confrontation came during the dinner service. Melissa stormed over to my table, her white dress practically glowing under the reception lights. "What did you do?" she hissed, keeping her voice low but unable to hide her anger. "The coordinator says you changed everything at the last minute." I maintained my composure, aware of curious eyes turning our way. "I adjusted my gift to match my importance to you," I replied simply. "Back row guests don't typically fund premium open bars." Her face flushed as my words hit home. "You're being ridiculous," she sputtered. "It's just seating. I had to accommodate Claire's family. They're very well connected." I nodded as though this explained everything. "And now I've accommodated my bank account. Congratulations on your marriage, Melissa." As she stood there speechless, Claire approached, eyeing me suspiciously. "Everything okay here?" she asked, placing a protective hand on Melissa's arm. I stood, gathering my purse. "Absolutely. I was just leaving," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. As I walked toward the exit, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. It was James, looking concerned and slightly out of breath. "Sarah, wait," he called, catching up to me near the doorway. "What's going on?" "Melissa's upset, and the wedding coordinator's telling me about last-minute changes." I studied his face, realizing he had no idea what his bride had done. "Ask your wife where she seated me today, James," I said gently. "Ask her why her best friend, who paid for this entire wedding, was hidden in the back corner." His expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. "That can't be right," he murmured. "Melissa showed me the seating chart. You were supposed to be at the family table, right next to her parents." This revelation stung even more. Melissa had deliberately changed my seating without telling her groom. "Well," I said, forcing lightness into my voice, "it seems your bride made some adjustments, just as I did to my financial contribution." I patted his arm. "Be happy, James, you're a good man. I hope she values you more than she valued our friendship." Outside in the cool evening air, I finally let the tears come. 20 years of friendship dissolved over wedding seating and social climbing. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Melissa, alternating between anger and desperate pleas to return. I silenced it and walked toward the beach, needing space to process what had happened. The sound of waves crashing against the shore provided a soothing backdrop to my thoughts. I kicked off my heels and let my feet sink into the cool sand, wondering how I'd missed the signs of Melissa's transformation. Had she always been this person? Or had the allure of status and acceptance changed her? The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd wanted to give her the perfect day. But in doing so, I'd given her the opportunity to reveal who she truly was. Perhaps it was a painful gift, but a necessary one. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that save us from greater heartbreak down the road. I spent an hour walking along the shoreline, finding unexpected peace in the aftermath of confrontation. When I returned to the hotel, I discovered James's grandmother sitting in the lobby, resting her tired legs. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, gesturing to the empty seat beside her. She patted the cushion welcomingly. "I was hoping to thank you properly," she said, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. "Not just for my seat upgrade, but for what you did in there. Takes courage to stand up for yourself." We chatted easily. This woman who had lived nearly 8 decades and had seen her share of human nature. "My grandson married a climber," she observed without malice. "Not the worst quality in a person, but it's best to know it up front." I laughed despite myself. "I wish I'd seen it sooner." She patted my hand. "Sometimes we need to be pushed all the way to the back row before we see the whole picture clearly." Her words resonated deeply, offering perspective I hadn't considered. Perhaps this painful experience wasn't just an ending, but a clarifying moment, a chance to reassess what I valued in relationships. The next morning, I checked out early, avoiding any awkward encounters. As I waited for my rideshare, the hotel manager approached with an envelope. "From the groom," he explained. Inside was a handwritten note from James. "Sarah, I've learned what really happened. I'm deeply sorry for how you were treated. Your friendship deserved better. The changes you made were more than fair. Thank you for everything you did for us, including the final lesson in dignity. James." Beneath his signature was a personal check covering a significant portion of what I'd spent on the wedding. While I appreciated the gesture, I knew I wouldn't cash it. This wasn't about money. It had never been about money. It was about respect, about valuing the people who care for you. As my car arrived, I took one last look at the beautiful resort where my longest friendship had effectively ended. I felt a strange lightness, as if putting down a heavy burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. Sometimes the most generous thing we can do for ourselves is recognize when a relationship no longer serves us and have the courage to walk away. 3 months passed, and life moved forward, as it always does. I threw myself into work, traveled a bit, and spent quality time with friends who genuinely appreciated my presence. Melissa had tried reaching out several times, first with angry accusations, then tearful apologies, and finally with casual overtures as if nothing had happened. I responded politely but maintained my distance, a boundary that felt increasingly healthy as time passed. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Claire is here to see you," she said, looking puzzled. I was equally surprised but asked her to send Claire in. The woman who entered my office looked different from the confident social butterfly I remembered, more subdued, almost hesitant. "I owe you an apology," she began without preamble. "I didn't understand the history between you and Melissa when I inserted myself into your friendship." I gestured for her to sit, curious about this unexpected visit. "What changed?" I asked directly. Claire sighed, twisting her wedding ring. "Turns out, I was just the newest best friend. Last week, she did the same thing to me, pushed me aside for her new boss's wife." Claire's revelation wasn't particularly surprising, but her next words were, "James left her," she said quietly. "He said the wedding showed him who she really was, and he couldn't unsee it." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "He cited what she did to you as the moment he knew he'd made a mistake." I absorbed this information, feeling a complex mix of vindication and sadness. "I'm sorry their marriage didn't work out," I said sincerely. "And I was, despite everything. I had wanted Melissa to be happy." Claire nodded, understanding the nuance in my response. "She's been telling everyone you ruined her wedding out of jealousy. I thought you should know." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. I spent nearly $50,000 trying to make her wedding perfect. If that's jealousy, it's the most expensive case in history. Claire smiled wryly. "That's why I'm here. People should know the truth." She stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, what you did that day, standing up for yourself while still letting the wedding proceed, it made an impression on a lot of us, including me." After Claire left, I sat reflecting on our conversation. The easy path would have been complete revenge, canceling everything, creating a scene, exposing Melissa publicly, but that wasn't who I was. By maintaining my dignity and simply adjusting my contribution to match my treatment, I'd acted with integrity while still respecting myself. The wedding had proceeded, just without the extravagant extras. In the end, Melissa had revealed her true character not just to me, but to everyone present, including her new husband. No amount of exposed behavior could have been more damaging than her own actions. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. It was James, asking if we could meet for coffee sometime, just as friends, no complications. I found myself smiling as I typed a response. Not every ending is truly an end. Sometimes it's just a redirection to where we should have been all along. I wasn't interested in James romantically, but I appreciated his character and the way he'd handled the aftermath. Perhaps there was room for a new friendship to grow from the ashes of what had been lost. That coffee with James turned into a genuine friendship that caught us both by surprise. There was never anything romantic between us, just mutual respect and understanding. He had filed for annulment, citing fraud and misrepresentation, and was slowly rebuilding his life. I keep thinking about what my grandmother told me after the wedding, he shared one afternoon. She said, "That friend of Melissa's, the one who paid for everything, she showed more character in how she handled disrespect than Melissa showed in all the years you've known her." I felt a rush of affection for his grandmother, who had seen through this situation with such clarity. James continued, his expression thoughtful. "She also said something I can't forget. Pay attention to how people treat those who can do nothing for them." I realized I'd never really seen how Melissa treated waiters, or taxi drivers, or anyone she deemed beneath her socially. But once I started noticing, I couldn't stop. His words resonated deeply. Sometimes the most revealing aspects of a person's character are visible not in how they treat their equals, but in how they treat those they believe don't matter. 6 months after the wedding, I received an invitation that made me smile. James's grandmother was celebrating her 80th birthday, and she had personally requested my presence. The handwritten note included with the formal invitation read, "To the young woman who showed me that principles still matter. Your presence would make an old lady very happy." I attended the celebration, held at a charming restaurant overlooking the city. There, surrounded by James's warm and unpretentious family, I found unexpected healing. His grandmother introduced me to everyone as the friend with the backbone of steel and heart of gold. We laughed about the wedding drama, now transformed into a family legend of sorts. "You know," his grandmother confided as we shared birthday cake, "sometimes the universe has to show you what something isn't before it can show you what something is." She gestured around the room. "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when they have every reason to walk away." I looked around at these people who had welcomed me without question, appreciating the simple truth. In her words, my story could have ended as a cautionary tale about friendship and betrayal, but it evolved into something more meaningful. 1 year after the infamous wedding, I found myself in a position to help another friend realize her dream. My colleague Denise had been saving for years to start a small business, a bookshop cafe that would serve as a community gathering space. When her loan application was rejected, I saw an opportunity to invest differently this time. "I'd like to help," I told her, "but with clear terms." We drew up a proper business agreement, part investment, part loan, with expectations clearly defined on both sides. The difference was striking. Denise treated my contribution with respect and transparency, providing regular updates and honoring our agreement. The cafe opened to local acclaim, becoming a beloved neighborhood fixture. On opening night, Denise raised a toast to partners who value each other. Our eyes met across the room, mutual appreciation flowing between us. This was what genuine reciprocity felt like, not taken for granted, but treasured. The contrast between these two experiences taught me invaluable lessons about giving. Generosity should come from the heart, yes, but it shouldn't come at the expense of self-respect. There's profound difference between being generous and being used. True friends celebrate your kindness without exploiting it. They accept your gifts with gratitude rather than entitlement. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish or mean. It makes you someone worthy of respect. Starting with self-respect. I occasionally hear about Melissa through mutual acquaintances. She's moved to another city, started over. Sometimes I wonder if she learned anything from what happened, if she ever truly understood the consequences of her actions. But that's her journey now, separate from mine. As for me, I've become more discerning about where I invest my time, energy, and yes, money. Not because I'm less generous, but because I now understand that true generosity requires worthy recipients, people who value the gift and the giver equally. Life has a way of coming full circle when you least expect it. 2 years after the wedding incident, I attended a charity gala for children's literacy, a cause close to my heart. I had just finished bidding on a silent auction item when I turned and found myself face to face with Melissa. Time seemed to freeze as we regarded each other across the crowded room. She looked different somehow, less polished, more authentic. After a moment of awkward silence, she spoke first. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice carrying none of the defensiveness I might have anticipated. I nodded, maintaining my composure. "I volunteer with their reading program," I explained simply. Another pause, heavy with unspoken history, then she surprised me. "I've wanted to talk to you for a long time," she said quietly. "Not to excuse what I did, but to tell you I understand now what it feels like to be discarded by someone you trusted." Something in her expression suggested this wasn't just words. I found myself agreeing to hear her out over coffee the following week, curious despite my better judgment. That coffee conversation with Melissa wasn't about rekindling our friendship, but about closure. She had indeed experienced her own painful awakening after being similarly cast aside by new friends who had only been interested in what she could offer them. "It took losing everything to see what I had done to you," she admitted, eyes downcast. "James was right to leave, Claire was right to expose me, and you were right to stand up for yourself." I didn't feel the vindication I might once have expected. Instead, I felt a quiet sadness for the friendship we had lost, coupled with hope that Melissa had genuinely changed. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I just wanted you to know that your actions that day, they eventually saved me from myself." As we parted ways, I reflected on how growth often comes from our most painful experiences. Melissa and I would never again be what we once were to each other. But perhaps we had each gained something valuable from the dissolution of our friendship. She had gained self-awareness, and I had gained self-respect. The story of my best friend's wedding and its aftermath changed me in ways I'm still discovering. Where I once might have silently accepted mistreatment to keep the peace, I now speak up. Where I might have given endlessly without expectation of basic respect in return, I now establish healthy boundaries. These aren't acts of selfishness, but of self-preservation. They're the quiet revolution of someone who has learned their own worth. The wedding that I paid for but couldn't properly attend became a defining moment in my life, not because of the money spent or the friendship lost, but because it was the day I finally understood that generosity without boundaries isn't generosity at all. It's self-abandonment, as James's grandmother so wisely observed. Sometimes you need to be pushed all the way to the back row before you can see the whole picture clearly. And what a clarifying view it turned out to be. From that vantage point, I could finally see which relationships deserved investment and which were merely withdrawing without deposit. Sometimes people ask if I regret what I did that day, calling the caterer, downgrading the reception, making my stand in such a public way. I always answer honestly, my only regret is not recognizing sooner that I deserved better. True friendship isn't measured by extravagant gifts or blank checks. It's measured by mutual respect, by the knowledge that you matter to someone beyond what you can provide. In the years since that wedding, I've built relationships that reflect this understanding, connections based on reciprocity rather than utility. I've learned to give from abundance rather than depletion, to friends who value the gesture more than the gift itself. The wedding that should have been a celebration of love became instead a celebration of self-worth, my own. And while it wasn't the happy ending I'd originally envisioned for Melissa and me, it was precisely the beginning I needed for myself. Sometimes the most valuable gift we can give ourselves is the courage to say, "This is where I draw the line, this is what I deserve," and then to stand firmly in that truth, even when it costs us something we thought we couldn't live without. Looking back, I realized that paying for that wedding was never really about the money. It was about expressing love for someone I considered family, about wanting to see joy on the face of a person who had shared my childhood secrets and teenage dreams. The financial investment was substantial, yes, but the emotional investment was immeasurable. That's what made the betrayal so painful. Not the wasted funds, but the casual disregard for a bond I had believed unbreakable. Yet in that pain came clarity. I discovered that true generosity isn't measured by dollar amounts or extravagant gestures, but by the integrity with which it's offered and received. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to establish consequences for disrespect. And perhaps most importantly, I discovered that walking away from someone who devalues you isn't giving up, it's growing up. These realizations didn't come easily or without tears, but they came with a certainty that has guided my relationships ever since. The wedding fiasco taught me something profound about the nature of giving. When we give to others, whether it's our money, time, or emotional support, we aren't just offering a gift, we're engaging in a form of trust. We trust that the recipient values not just what we provide, but who we are. We trust that there's a foundation of mutual respect underlying the exchange. When that trust is violated, it's not merely disappointing. It's a fundamental breach of the social contract that binds us together. By standing up for myself at Melissa's wedding, I wasn't just protecting my bank account. I was honoring that social contract and asserting its importance. In the years since, I've become more intentional about where and how I invest in others, not because I give less, but because I give more thoughtfully to those who demonstrate through their actions, not just their words, that they value the relationship we share. This discernment isn't selfishness. It's wisdom born of experience. As this chapter of my life comes to a close, I find myself grateful for the lessons learned, however painful the teaching method. The back row experience that once felt like humiliation now feels like liberation the moment I finally recognized and acted upon my own worth. I've discovered that generosity without boundaries isn't really generosity at all, it's permission for exploitation. True giving comes from a place of strength and self-respect, not from insecurity or the need for approval. Today, my friendships are fewer but deeper, built on mutual appreciation rather than what either party can provide. I no longer confuse being needed with being valued, or generosity with self-sacrifice. And on those occasions when I do help friends financially or otherwise, it comes with clear expectations of basic respect, not as a condition of my giving, but as a foundation for any healthy relationship. The wedding that should have celebrated love instead celebrated something equally important: the quiet power of knowing your own value and having the courage to honor it. Melissa's wedding taught me that sometimes the most generous thing we can do is establish boundaries not out of spite, but out of self-respect. It showed me that true strength isn't found in endless giving, but in knowing when to stand firm, and perhaps most importantly, it revealed that our responses to disrespect often say more about our character than the disrespect itself says about others. I chose not to create a scene or completely ruin Melissa's day. Instead, I simply aligned my contribution with my treatment. That decision, maintaining my dignity while still allowing the event to proceed, reflected the person I wanted to be. Regardless of how others behaved, in the end, weddings come and go, but the way we honor ourselves endures. By choosing self-respect over martyrdom, I didn't just change the outcome of one event, I changed the trajectory of my own life. And for that unexpected gift, the permission to value myself as I had valued others, I am genuinely grateful. Sometimes the most important relationships we nurture are the ones we have with ourselves,